And welcome, everybody, to another amazing day right here on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Of course, I'm your host, Andrew Cooperrider. And today we'll be going over a school choice amendment, of course. We've talked about it a few times on this show, but yesterday I had made a post on Facebook, and some of the responses to it point to a failure. I think alarm bells should be ringing for those who want Amendment 2 to pass. There has been a failure. Perhaps it's because the argument from the beginning has been set up wrong. But we are currently, for those of you who want to see the Amendment 2 pass, I believe we are failing on that fight. I'll go over why. Also, Andy Beshear fulfilled his dutiful role to the Kamala Harris campaign of being the pro-abortion advocate. And he goes on to CNN the other day and goes ahead and attacks, defends, whatever you want to call it, abortion rights. And in doing so, starts talking about rights being taken away from people who could never, ever get pregnant in the first place. Just goes to show how much they've jumped the shark on this one. They picked Andy Beshear to talk on the issue, and, well, I guess he's maybe taking it a little too serious, gotten a little crazy. So we'll go over that. We'll have all that and more today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. But before I dig down into it, please make sure you like, comment, share, and subscribe. You can head over to theandrewshow.com. Hit the contact tab if you want to reach out to the show. Obviously, we ask that you share this show with others. But without further ado, let's get down into it. So, yesterday on Facebook and the Twitters, I had made a post regarding a little bit regarding school choice. So those of you who listened to Tuesday's show, I quickly went over the fact that here in Kentucky, private schools are twice as likely to be blue ribbon schools as public schools. And we went through the numbers and explained how that works. Now, granted, I'm not saying there's a lot of private schools that are blue ribbon schools, but there's also not a lot of public schools that are blue ribbon schools. The data is such that there was 2 private schools that were blue ribbon, and there were 5 public schools that were blue ribbon. And because there's significantly less private schools in Kentucky, well, then it equals out to where you're twice as likely to be a blue ribbon school in Kentucky if you're a private school. That's simple math. But Andy Beshear had originally, the reason why I even brought it up, though, is because Andy Beshear was touting the blue ribbon schools, and that achievement by public schools is somehow a victory and a reason to not pass this school choice amendment. So, of course, I had to fire back, and I quote tweeted him, and I said, in Kentucky, a private school is 2 times more likely to be a 2024 national blue ribbon school. Vote yes on 2. Let's give more kids the chance to receive a high-quality, personalized education. Now, that's a pretty standard post. And I had a few interactions, a few comments. I don't really typically comment back to people on my posts. I generally only read the comments when I'm preparing for a show, and I think it might be important to talk about what was said on some of these posts. But, I don't respond back in the moment. I don't get into Facebook arguments. I don't get into Twitter arguments. Just feel like it's a waste of my time. But looking at the comments, I can tell there's some big issues and problems that we're having when it comes to the school choice amendment, because you will see comments. Now, obviously, this on both Facebook and Twitter, you'll see a little bit of a swarm. You'll see more people in the comments supporting school choice on Facebook, but in Twitter, it's pretty much all against school choice in the comments. And obviously, let's just call a spade. The left, and for whatever reason, the left has decided that being anti-school choice is the way to go, specifically in Kentucky. This isn't like a common thing nationwide. I hope people understand that nationwide, in a lot of Democrat states, they have very robust and far-reaching school choice systems. It's not actually like a Republican-Democrat issue. I mean, take places like New York, California, like they have school choice, they have charter schools. Like, this isn't a blue versus red issue in a lot of other states. So for some reason it is here in Kentucky. And whenever there's a blue versus red issue, frankly, blue lefties are a little bit more, not a little bit, they're a lot more organized for a plethora of reasons. And largely that can do with the fact that, frankly, their outreach groups, their baseline work groups are better funded. The donors amongst the liberal class, the Democrat Party as a whole, that group as a whole understands the concept of voter reach out. They understand the concept of playing the long game. It's funny here in Kentucky, we have a senator, Mitch McConnell, who wrote a book called The Long Game, talking about playing political long games. But despite that, we haven't seen any kind of concerted efforts for youth reach out. In fact, when we start to see youth groups, like groups that are youthful, growing at Kentucky universities or Kentucky colleges, they end up being squashed. I've spoken to a number of college Republican groups. Last night, I went to Murray State University. I spoke to the college Republicans there, and I'm not going to pretend like the room was full of necessarily people. There's about 12 to maybe 15 on the high side, and probably around 12, 13 or so people present for their normal run-of-the-mill meeting, which doesn't sound like a lot, but I've also spoke to transy young Republicans. I've spoke to UK young Republicans, University of Kentucky young Republicans, that is. And with those places, frankly, the Murray State Republican Party, Republican Youth Party, the student party, was larger than either of those two probably combined. And that's not to say anything bad about the people who were working those groups at the time. I appreciate the hard work that goes into it. It's very difficult. I get it on liberal campuses, especially to go ahead and attract people into the college Republican groups. It's difficult. It's hard. But a lot of that, why is it difficult? Why is it hard? Well, it has to do with that there's so much funding for these liberal groups on college campuses. And that liberal money is flowing from the liberal donors at the top and a concerted effort by those who are pulling the strings monetarily within the Democrat Party to reach out and help people. But meanwhile, on the Republican side, we have the most effective grassroots operators on the Republican side, just talking nationwide. I'd say probably the most effective right now is Scott Pressler, who's doing a very good job doing a push in Pennsylvania for registration for the Republican Party, doing a lot of registering and doing a lot of groundwork out there. And if it's a close election in Pennsylvania, it'll be because, and Trump wins, it'll be because Scott Pressler went out there and did the work. But what's crazy is, take this last RNC President Ronna McDaniels, she pushed aside people like Scott Pressler, said, I don't want anything to do with you. And that's because the young conservatives, the young Republicans, are by nature anti-establishment. Just period. That's how they are. Nobody gets excited to go work for Mitch McConnell as a college student. Nobody's sitting there like, whose office I really want to do? Who's really doing the important work? Mitch McConnell's office. That's who's doing the important work. Very exciting. No, that's not it. Young conservatives get excited about liberty. They get excited about true conservative beliefs too, like spending less money. Many of you maybe don't remember Ron Paul Youth and how that turned into some other movements, but that was the last real strong concerted youth movement on the Republican side of the aisle. And what'd they do to Ron Paul during the presidential election? Right? And so it's because those people, those kids, if you want to call them kids, but the young Republicans that come forward, they want to see results. They want to see people standing for their values like they say they would. The same as young Democrats do. But the problem here is that when it comes to at least the Democrat Party, at least their rhetoric, they don't always follow through. So, of course, that's why they struggle at times and why people become disinfected. Don't get me wrong. But at least their rhetoric at least points to that group. Instead, we have people in Kentucky going back to people like Mitch McConnell, people like Andy Barr, that instead of recognizing the youth, the group, the anti-establishment, the conservatives, and now the majority of your party does not believe in funding more for Ukraine. That's period, straightforward. Every single survey makes it clear. The majority of Republicans don't want to fund Ukraine. And instead of at least playing to that base, if anything in rhetoric, and I'm just talking from the sheer, just do your rhetoric side of things, not even actual actions, just rhetoric. They don't even give that to you. Instead, you people like Andy Barr standing up at Lincoln Day dinners talking about how important it is we fund Ukraine and getting yelled at by the crowd and not caring. Instead, we got Mitch McConnell standing up there actively saying, no, we need to, you guys are all wrong. This is the most important issue. This is more important than the border. We've got to fund the war in Ukraine. And while they may privately believe that, putting that to the side, the very fact they won't even do the rhetoric of pretending that they don't believe that. That's why we can't get the youth. That's why it's not inspiring. Nobody wants to work for these people. And so wrapping that back into school choice, I was there last night, had some conversations with people there about school choice. And then also, obviously, this post online. And frankly, there is a big problem that the pro-school choice people have here in Kentucky. And whether it was a tactful move or whether it was smart or not, but frankly speaking, when they put out the constitutional amendment, there's no policy attached to it, right? Because before we can even have the conversation about school choice, before we can even say what does a plan look like, we have to pass this amendment to put a plan in place. But that means that we're putting forward a constitutional amendment with no planned policy attached to it. So there's nothing to be defined. So that has given free rein to Democrats to basically attack and create the biggest boogeymans they can, because they're not arguing against a policy. So they're going to go out, they're going to define their own policy. They're going to create their own policies for them to argue against, and it's going to be the worst possible policies they can imagine and whatever they can cook up, because there wasn't any policy put forward by Republicans to say, if this amendment passed, this is what we're going to do with it here in Kentucky. It really doesn't matter what that would be, but a specific policy would be great. So instead, we have a whole lot of people who are cooking up on the left side of things, on the vote no side of things, I guess. I wouldn't even call it left and right necessarily, but the vote no side of things, they're cooking up whatever policies they can think of to scare people into believing anything they can. And I go to my comments now, and finally getting around to it, but we're getting there. So I go to my comments now on that same exact post, and I see kind of two issues. One issue I see, of course, is from those who are radically no, I guess, and for a different reason. You know, these are typically a lot of them homeschoolers, and as such, that say that, hey, if the state offers vouchers of some sort, or if the state starts getting involved with funding education, it's going to open up the door for them to start telling homeschoolers what to do and everyone else what to do. And I've dealt with this before on the show, but the basic straightforward response I have to that is, what is stopping the state? What is stopping the government from going ahead and doing that right now? Nothing. There's no law, there's no constitutional thing, there's nothing stopping them from doing it other than the voters, the people, and that check will still be in place. But a lot of the other responses I see, for an example, somebody had commented, the elite private schools don't want voucher kids. Well, that's weird. If they don't want voucher kids, why are all the quote-unquote elite private schools and private schools that aren't, maybe you wouldn't call elite, literally saying that, yeah, you should vote yes on Amendment 2 if they don't want these kids? Someone else goes, private schools don't have the teachers or resources to handle a giant influx of new students. You're going to see all of them raise tuition costs. Why wouldn't they? ESA/vouchers will just not being a subsidy for parents that could already afford private school to begin with. Well, to deal with the first part, they don't have the resources to handle the influx. So simultaneously, what this person just said, by the way, is that somehow there will be a giant influx of new students to private schools, but at the same time, it's only going to end up as a subsidy for parents that already go to private schools. How do you see an influx in students while only keeping the same amount of students? But there's a lot of other things where they go through and talk about different, it's a scam, it's a money grab for the wealthy, and people make those comments. And last night when I was talking to somebody about this issue, when it came down to, hey, maybe if it's a full voucher of the Seek money, let's say it's $4,500. So like, what can we do with that? And I think this is the other problem you have with Amendment 2. Not only is there no actual policy put forward to debate on, so that gives the Democrats the ability to cook up whatever policies they want in order to debate on, but also there's a huge education issue when it comes to what's available out there. What can you do with school choice options? For an example, a lot of people don't understand that, hey, maybe ESAs come into play, educational savings accounts, which literally every single parent can take advantage of, regardless of your income stats. That's simply, you can, much like HSAs, you put money aside pre-tax that you can spend on your kid's education. So if you have a special needs child or just a child that needs extra tutoring or those kinds of things, well, guess what? You don't need to put thousands of dollars aside. But if you're getting your child tutoring to help them out, that's now offers a tax deduction to help you out. That could help out anybody. You know, not just super rich people care enough about their kids to get tutoring. Here's the other thing that many people are unaware of, and that is homeschool pods. For some people, they think, well, I really don't have the time to homeschool, and that's because I have to sit there and educate my kids 5 days a week. I have to work. I have to, other things I have to take care of. It's very difficult for me to do so, unfortunately. The economy and government is such that they've made it cost so much to live in this country that I have to work a job as well as my husband does, and so neither of us can help with educating the kid 5 days a week. But there's homeschool pods out there where people rotate, where maybe it doesn't take 5 days a week. Maybe it takes 1 day or 2 days a week out of your time, and then you're relying on some other people to help educate your kids in this pod situation. Sometimes those pods cost money to pay into. I'm familiar with ones in like Garrett County, for an example, that are operating out of small buildings, and they're homeschool pods. They're homeschooling, but the parents are taking turns kind of helping educate the kids, being the teachers. There's a cooperative school. Now, it's literally, I would not say, it's pretty liberal, right? But there's a Redwood cooperative school here in Lexington that requires, it's really interesting. Basically, like I said, it's a liberal school, so let's not, they got their DEI statements and they're super progressive, but whatever. And if you decide you're going to work in the school, that lowers tuition down, where you can start to see tuitions around the $5,000 to $6,000 range a lot of times as you're volunteering to help out. And with that in mind, the ability to volunteer and help out gets you involved in your kid's education. Well, it's a $4,500, let's say it's a voucher from our Seek Money, $4,500. You're volunteering your time. You got to come out of pocket maybe $1,500, $2,000 a year. But man, what an opportunity now that you're offering. There's a lot of parents out there that maybe they can't afford $7,000, $8,000, but they can afford $2,000 a year if it meant their kids were getting a high quality, specialized, specific education. There's another school here in Lexington called the Lexington Latin School, where it's a 3-day program. So you're supposed to homeschool your kid or work with your kids more than they just do. But for 3 days a week, you go to the Lexington Latin School. You actually take part in the school there. And for elementary through 6th grade, their current tuition for 24 to 25 for the 3-day program is $5,995. For the 7th through 12th grade, it's $6,500. You have a book fee, an activity fee. The total cost ends up being $6,505 and $7,100. Well, geez, if you're getting $4,500, that's only $2,000 you have to come up with for kindergarten through 6th grade school to go to Lexington Latin School. And you say, Andrew, that's in Lexington. What about Louisville? Well, in Louisville, you have options too as well. You have a Latin school like the Highlands Latin School. They're 24 to 25 tuition for their programs, 3-day program. For 1st and 2nd graders is $6,300. For 3rd and 6th graders is $8,300. So 1st, 2nd grade, $2,000 a year, less than $2,000. That would be what, $1,800? About $1,800 a year over what your voucher is. You can send your kid to the Highlands Latin School. But see, that's the thing people don't realize. When they think of private schools, they think, oh, private schools are like $20,000 a year. But that's not the only option. So the problem we have, a fewfold on this argument. The first is there's no policy to be debated. And so that lets the left feel free to go ahead and cook up whatever policies they want to. But there's also an education problem of what's available to more people. And that's where I would say if I was running the show, if I was in charge of a PAC or something that's tasked with getting this amendment passed based upon what I'm seeing, this is what I would suggest. First, you need to inform people about what kind of educational opportunities are available. And then you need to cut an ad. Have parents from these schools talking about what educational opportunities they have, how much it costs them to go ahead and do it. Showing that it can be less expensive. And then at the end say, shouldn't all children have the opportunity for this if they want to? Shouldn't all of them have the opportunity for this if they want to? Create that bandwagoning effect. Create the wow, I didn't know that was available to us. Grab some people from these homeschool pods out in places like Garrett County, where they have a little school set up. Grab somebody who runs a school, talks about the school, the cost, how much parental time involvement it does take to go ahead and do it. Have them talk about when they opened up, because a lot of these programs are new. And then have them talk about how a school choice amendment would make a difference. Find these individuals running these individualized schools, these cheaper schools, these schools that cost $5,000 to $6,000 a year, and have them get on camera. And then play those ads regionally in those areas. So they're like, oh yeah, that's right in my backyard. I didn't know that was available. They don't know what options there are. We need to show them. Ringing the alarm bell here. All right, switching over now to the national politics, of course. We have Andy Beshear went on CNN. Let's take a listen to that.
We heard from Donald Trump today talking about his economic policies that he would implement if he wins a second term. Vice President Harris is set to lay out her agenda tomorrow. And this comes as, these new CNN numbers that are out today show likely voters trust him more than they do her on the economy, 50% to 39%. Why do you think that is?
Well, people don't always remember the recent past.
So this is going to be our first stopping point. So you're losing on the issue when you come out and say, hey, we trust Trump more on the economy, or Trump did a better job, or we're doing better under the Trump economy. And your response to them is not, okay, let me explain what we're going to do to improve where we are. Here's our solutions or anything else. Instead, your response is to try to convince the voters they don't know what they're talking about. Your feelings are not your feelings. Let me explain to you why your feelings are not your feelings. And not only for most swing voters, especially, is this going to be offensive, but it's ineffective. It does the opposite. Because if somebody's feeling to themselves, the economy is worse than it is now. The economy is worse now than it was before. If that's what they're thinking to themselves. You sitting there telling them, oh, it's okay, you're misremembering, you don't know, doesn't tell me what you're going to do to make it better. You telling me that, no, your feelings are not your feelings are inaccurate, doesn't change my feelings and doesn't make me want to vote for you. So he's already starting off badly when it comes to the question of the economy. There's another moment of this interview, though, I want to zero in on, and that's when Andy Beshear fulfilled his duty as a surrogate for the Kamala Harris campaign, and that is to talk about abortion. Let's take a listen to that discussion.
And obviously abortion is something else that your party is counting on. You ran on abortion as an issue, not something we would typically see a Democrat do in a red state like Kentucky. But it was something that you made a priority of yours. And Donald Trump has been talking about this issue out on the campaign trail. Listen to what he had to say to women last night.
Because I am your protector. I want to be your protector. As president, I have to be your protector. I hope you don't make too much of it. I hope the fake news doesn't go, oh, he wants to be their protector. Well, I am. As president, I have to be your protector. You will no longer be thinking about abortion.
Is that what you think how women will feel after the election, that they won't be thinking about abortion anymore if he wins?
No, of course they'll be thinking about it. Donald Trump's handpicked Supreme Court tore a constitutional right away from my mom, my wife, my daughter, and half this country.
pause there. Okay, so already he's starting off with some pretty extreme statements. So, he's trying to tie this in. He's a guy talking about abortion, so he's trying to try in why he cares. And first person he lists, who's the first person he says that the Roe v. Wade decision ripped a right away from, and that was his mother. Now, for those of you who are unaware, Beshear's mom, I believe, is 77 years old. It is believed the oldest woman to get pregnant naturally was 59 years old. 59 years old. So not only, I guess technically speaking, his mother can sort of get pregnant if a miracle, like a super duper miracle, like a miracle that's never happened before. But as he's talking about ripping rights away from his mother getting an abortion, he might as well talk about rights being ripped away from his father to get an abortion. Because they're pretty much, statistically speaking, just as likely to get pregnant. His dad is just as likely to get pregnant as his mother when we're looking at the grand scheme of statistics. When you compare what the chances are to his wife getting pregnant, to his mother getting pregnant, his mother's closer to his father as far as the chance to get pregnant. What are you talking about? Your mother getting her rights taken away? Are you saying that men had their rights taken away to get an abortion? Well, he probably would say that because, of course, they can't even define what a woman is. They'd say that men can get pregnant because that's the liberal left craziness we have going on right now. But my point is that you're already going downhill when you're like, you ripped a right away from my 77-year-old mom to get an abortion. And you're starting off there, you're in trouble. Let's keep hearing, though, what he has to say.
It's left in states like mine with the most draconian laws on the books. 10, 12-year-old girls impregnated through rape with no options. He keeps saying it's a beautiful thing to leave this to the states, not in my state. What it's done is couples that have wanted to have kids so badly but have a non-viable pregnancy, if it's not going to ultimately kill the woman, she's got to carry it to term just to listen to her child die. 85% of Kentuckians disagree with that. It's far too extreme.
Now, you guys can't see his face, but you could tell right away he knew he was starting to struggle. He was trying to hard to find examples because he just talked about 10 and 12 years old getting pregnant, forced to carry a child to term. If there was one example of a 10 or 12-year-old who was a victim of rape or incest, it could only be a victim of rape or incest, really, they're 10 or 12, and then had to have a child and carry it to term in Kentucky. If there's one example of that, it would be talked about. You would know about it. We would know that person's name. We know Hadley Duvall's name, who was raped due to incest as a young, not 10, 12, but as a young girl, got pregnant, and she didn't even have an abortion. She didn't give birth to a child. She had a miscarriage. And we know her name. That's the story they could find. Somebody who wasn't even forced to give birth, or somebody who ended up needing to get an abortion to stop them from having birth. Somebody who had a miscarriage, but was young when they were raped. That's their best example. They don't have a 10 or 12-year-old to point to. He just made that up. He made up pretend situations that don't really exist and have never exist in order to justify changing a law. Like, what are you talking about? And then he goes on to talk about people who are told that their pregnancies are non-viable being forced to carry them to term. Can they find examples of that? Has there been anybody to sue saying they want an abortion because they're being forced to carry a non-viable pregnancy to term? No, they can't find that. They can't find that example because it doesn't exist. I'm not saying that there isn't non-viable pregnancies, but I'm saying that in case of life of the mother, there is an exception right now in our law. So that opportunity is there already in case of life of a mother. And the likelihood of having a non-viable pregnancy that isn't impacting the mother's life actually be a completely non-viable pregnancy is very slim. That's why they can't find anybody to talk on these issues. We continue.
You talk about extreme, and we hear how your party talks about what would happen if Trump is reelected. But you have a lot of people in your state who are Trump supporters. I mean, you know these voters very well, just as well as you know your own voters. Some of them may be Trump Beshear voters. So when you look at numbers that say 47% of registered voters would feel afraid if Trump won and 45% would feel afraid if she won, what does that say to you about how they view her? Why do you think they're afraid? 45% of registered voters are worried about a Harris win.
Well, because Donald Trump and his campaign uses fear. That's the number one thing they push, fear, and also trying to appeal to anger and to discontent, to turn one neighbor against another.
So, what? This is going to be the last section I play. That one is. But let's go over this. So they said 45% of voters fear Kamala Harris in office, 47% fear Trump in office. And so Caitlin Collins, the interviewee, she doesn't ask why 47% of voters fear Trump. She asks, what does it say that 45% of voters fear Kamala? Now, you could defend her asking that question because Beshear's a Kamala surrogate. And so, it's a harder question, right? Saying, why do 47% of voters fear Trump? Well, that's probably a more easier question. But saying, why are people afraid of Kamala Harris? That might be a more difficult question. So I'll defend her asking that question. But his response of, that's because Donald Trump peddles fear. More people fear Trump in office by 2 percentage points, according to what Caitlin Collins just said. So if you're saying that, 45% of people only fear Kamala Harris because Donald Trump peddles in fear, well, wouldn't that mean Kamala Harris is peddling in fear more than Trump is, since 2% more fear Trump? How does that work? But of course, that's the kind of vapid, dumb comments we have from Beshear, because that's the kind of vapid, dumb comments he gets to get away with, because he doesn't actually matter too much in Kentucky law. The few things he does do, he always overshoots it, like the executive order on conversion therapy. And so he ends up being relegated to nothing. Well, y'all, that's what we have time for today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Thank you all so much for joining me. We'll be back here. Hope you have a great rest of your day.